Hey guys, today I'm going to walk you through how to install the tactical kit for your Aeon Pro. The kit on here is the short dart kit, and there's another kit available that's the full dart kit. The only differences between the two are that the short dart kit only shoots short darts, and the full dart kit can shoot both full length and short length darts. Each pump kit comes with the pump, the rail, slide replacement, priming bar, and all the hardware necessary. They both also come with its own barrel ring. The only difference being that the full dart kit comes with this longer barrel ring with the Picatinny up top to support the longer length rail. And the short dart kit comes with the regular sized short barrel ring, and it also comes with this short dart spacer. So it converts the Aeon to only shoot short darts. And moving towards the back of the blaster, we have the rear tactical kit. It includes the stock attachment piece and the top rail, Picatinny rail. The kit only requires you to have 3 tools to install the kit. All you'll need is a drill, a Phillips head screwdriver, and a 7/64 drill bit. Alright, let's get started. I got a brand new Aeon over here, and let's open it up. You're going to need to keep one of these O-rings handy, because you're going to need that later if you have the short dart kit. First things first, you're going to need to take this whole thing apart. The next thing we have to do is remove all the locks. These are the locks. There's this clear piece here, this other hook piece that this clear piece connected to, and there's this depriming button. And while we're there, you could also get rid of these slides too, because you'll be replacing those. So you still want to keep the screws, so let's just take them out. The first thing we're going to install is the rail. Alright, now that you've emptied all the screws from the shells, you'd want to put it back together. Basically, you'll have a hollow shell, and you want to put your slide right over the Aeon, and you want to mark these 4 holes from the outside. What I like to do is I like to use a smaller drill bit. This isn't the 7/64 drill bit, but it's a smaller drill bit that you can get it right through the hole without actually making the hole any bigger than it needs to. If you don't have a smaller drill bit, another way you can do it is use like another small screwdriver or some type of pencil or stick, toothpick, anything that can scratch up the surface of the Aeon, and you just kind of like put it in there. Make sure that you're like rotating it and putting pressure, and you'll mark it. It's very slight, I don't know if you'll see that on the camera, but mark it with a Sharpie after that. And yeah, once you mark the holes, just drill it with the 7/64. Or what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill it with the smaller drill bit, and I'll drill out the holes later on. It helped because I'm right-handed. And another thing, a tip, is if you don't want this to be moving around too much, the slide to move around too much, you can install the screws in the slide beforehand, and maybe some of the screws to keep the shell together, and everything should align up pretty well. Here I drilled my pilot holes, and I'm going to drill the 7/64 holes. Now that we've drilled our holes, all you have to do is put your slide on. And the way we do that is take some of the screws and insert them from the inside of the shell. So one thing to keep in mind is that you're kind of screwing in a screw into fresh 3D printed plastic. The plastic doesn't have any threads, so in some cases it might be a little hard to screw in. It might be tough. Basically, you're going to need to do a really easy thing, which is to go like turn it to the right to dig in a little bit and back it off a little, and just keep doing that. And what you're essentially doing is tapping a thread into the plastic. And once you have this done, anytime you need to remove it for maintenance or like fitment checks, it's going to be super easy to do. So you just want this to be just snug enough that there's no gap in between the shell and the rail. And you don't want to over tighten any of the screws because you're threading directly into the plastic and you don't want to crack anything or strip it. Okay, and now it's done. You've installed the rail. You might notice that there might be a gap near the front, but that's okay because there's going to be some screws up here that secures the blaster together. Also worth noting is that on this side of the shell, there's actually a hole for one of the screws for the Aeon, and you're just going to remove that screw entirely because these two are going to help clamp the bottom of the shell together. The next thing we're going to do while the shell's still open is we're just going to do the exact same method of installing these rails to install the rear stock attachment. I actually find that this one, it might help to put some of the screws together for the shell just to hold it in place. And another thing you can do is get one of the hardware screws from the pump kit or rear tactical kit. They use the same screws. And let's put this one together in the back. Just make sure everything's nice and flush with each other. That way when you install and mark your holes, that it's going to go on just like this, and you're going to have a nice clean stock attachment point. So now that we have these two put together, semi put together I guess, just slip it on, and the same method as the front rail. You know, here's 2 screws on this side, 2 screws on that side, or holes I mean, and just drill your pilot holes or mark it with the screwdriver, and then drill it out with the 7/64 afterwards. One thing I'd like to do is I'd like to keep constant pressure this way to push the stock as flush as it can be to the shell while I drill. Yeah, so the hole should be around here. Just use the stock attachment as your pilot hole guide and you should be fine. Time to drill out the big holes. You can install the rear stock attachment in the same fashion as you've installed the front rail. Holes are done, and we're gonna get to the next step. Now that we have these installed, the next thing is for the short dart kits. You're gonna need to grab that O-ring that I told you to save at first, and the short dart spacer. So, let me get this out real quick. Now that we've gotten these 2 pieces out, what you're gonna wanna do is slip this O-ring over this short dart converter, right where this little ridge is. Just like that. And then the side that the O-ring is closer to, that's the front. So what you're going to want to do is take this piece and grab your telescoping rod, take it out of the plunger, and just pop it in here. Ooh. And it should just slide right in there, friction fit, and the O-ring will help it from coming out of place. Now that we have these 2 pieces installed, let's just put all the internals back together and install the pump. So before we close this up, if you have the rear tactical kit, now is the time to put in the top Picatinny rail. Grab it and just kind of slide it in here, just like that. You're going to want to put in your barrel ring before you close it up. Short dart pump users, you can just slide it in because the front isn't closed off like this full length one. You're going to want to put in all the screws. These 2 up front will use the hardware kit, and the one in the rear on the stock will use a hardware kit screw as well. All the other Aeon screws, you'll just use what it came with. These two up here, you actually need the Aeon screws, not the hardware kit screws. Remember to apply constant pressure to both halves. You can do it by pushing it down on the table or gripping it both halves like this. We're in close. Next part, let's focus on the actual pump and slide itself. What I like to do is I like to thread the slides first with the priming rod. So just remember to go slow, and the key is to make sure everything is aligned before screwing through. You don't want any pressure from the screw on both of these sides, because what you want is it to grab on both sides of the plastic and sandwich the metal bar. You don't want to go a little diagonal and push the other side of the plastic. That will cause it to crack. Sometimes when you screw the screws in for the first time, you might get a little blowout on the other side. You could just cut that off and it'll just make things a lot more smoother. So now that you have your bars attached to your priming or your slide, you're just gonna plop it on to this nub right here, exactly the same way that the original slide fit. Now you're gonna take the rest of the slide Aeon screws and just put them back into these holes in the slide. Be sure to keep constant pressure on both sides of the slide, or else you're gonna have a crack. Not a crack, but a split down the middle. Now that we have our slide and priming bar installed, all you have to do is put in the front grip, or the pump. Again, just making sure all the holes line up. Make sure you have clear view through all the holes. And just take it slow. This time you'll be using the rest of the hardware screws from the pump kit. Here we are. You've officially installed the pump kit. Now, the pump kit with this barrel ring, you're gonna need to have some type of barrel going back into the Aeon to support the front of this. I've seen people not install it, but I highly recommend that you do. Because if you do end up putting a higher spring load into this blaster, you're probably gonna be cranking down in the front. And I'd hate to see that these 4 screws give out or something. You never know, because it's still just plastic and screws. You want something extra to hold it up front, and that's why I recommend you either get a worker scar barrel, which would be great. You just have to put it all the way through and just into the Aeon, or even a regular Nerf barrel, a spare 19mm inner barrel. Should fit straight in there. This one's a little wonky. You might need to do little test fitments and stuff. And if you have brass, you've brassed your Aeon, it'll work just fine. Because this brass is just gonna go through the tubes and it'll just rest inside. You might want to put a couple wraps of electrical tape just to have it fit snugly in here, so you'd have even less barrel wobble as well. But for now, you can just put this guy back in, the original muzzle. So for the short dart kit, your barrel ring would fit this thing just fine. You're gonna need to put some lube on there and it'll fit a little bit easier, but this thing is just gonna go straight through and into the Aeon, and you'll be good. But for the full dart kit users, your lug is a little bit longer. Let's focus, a little bit longer. So if you want to keep this original muzzle, you can just grab an old piece of spare Nerf tube or any type of tube, similar, cut off a section and just have it bridge the gap. That way this is still supporting your rail in the bottom. So it looks something like that. Pretend there's a tube in there. And lastly, some grip recommendations. I highly recommend you use some sort of vertical grip that has screws that go through it. I know there's some vertical grips that have like a threaded knob on the bottom that applies pressure upwards into the rail. I don't recommend those because you're going to be using a lot of force pumping back and forth. And if that thing slips, you're going to smash your thumb straight. Bam. If this thing comes off, you're going to hit here and your knuckle is not going to like that. So I recommend like worker grips, Magpul grips, anything that just has this. The screws there. Angle foregrips don't really work too well because of the clearance here. There's not enough room unless you have an angle foregrip that sticks all the way out. So I'm going to install this real quick and I'll show you how it works. Alright, all installed, nice and sturdy. There's no wobble, and that's what you're looking for. And then there's a question that I get a lot is if this thing, because it's a 3D printed rail and a 3D printed pump, does it make that annoying sound that sounds kind of like this? And I'm happy to say that it doesn't. Yep. And another tip is if your kit does feel a little stiff, try loosening some of the screws, as it might be causing a little bit of blowout and rubbing in between the slide and the pump, or maybe where the rail and the pump and the slide and these slots. Another tip is if you have any grease or lubricant, just put a tiny amount into the rail right here and maybe onto this rail as well. Just a slight coat. They'll make it 100 times better if you're having troubles. And if anything, filing goes a long way, sanding and filing. Yeah. Before I forget, this rear stock attachment also has a sling mount for all your tactical needs. And also, let's have a firing demo. Okay, so even though this kit is a full dart kit that I've installed, over here I put in the short dart converter. So right now this kit will only take short darts, or this blaster specifically will only take the short darts. The short dart converter removes a lot of that slop, that play, so it doesn't have to telescope as much. And you can see that this is the furthest back that it goes, just enough to load one dart. I don't even think that loaded the dart, because this mag's not in. Okay, there we go. Just enough to load one short dart. And there you go. And the best part about it is now you can deprime the blaster. Just hold this back, hold the pump back, press the trigger, and now you don't risk dry fire and break your blaster. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to message me. I will try to help in any way possible. And if you have any suggestions, any special requests, let me know as well. I'd love to hear it. Thanks.